The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the memorial garden of the Conservation Center as I stood before the newly installed memorial plaque. The sound of rustling leaves from the rare maple trees my father had spent decades protecting should have been the most haunting thing I heard today. It wasn't. That honor belonged to my husband's whispered ultimatum, delivered through clenched teeth while he gripped my elbow too tight. Either we agree to develop this conservation area into luxury condos, or he's filing for divorce. I'm Autumn, and this is how my marriage died on the same day we held my father's memorial service. The crowd had thinned to just family now, if you could call Dominic's parents that anymore. Regina stood near the endangered flower beds, her predatory gaze fixed on me, while Lawrence hovered behind her like a shadow. They'd been circling closer all afternoon, no doubt rehearsing their carefully crafted speeches about progress and sustainable development. "You're hurting me," I said, trying to pull away from Dominic's grip. The sleeve of my black dress caught on his expensive cufflinks, a gift from Regina, of course. "This isn't a negotiation, Autumn. The board meeting is next month. They need our decision." His voice carried that familiar tone of corporate urgency that had become more frequent lately. "My father's memorial plaque isn't even set in the ground." I gestured to the bronze plate that highlighted Dad's 30 years of environmental conservation work. "Exactly. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly about what's best for everyone." I stared at the fresh soil around the native plants we'd just planted in Dad's memory, fighting the urge to laugh or scream or both. "What's best for everyone, or what's best for your mother's development company?" "Don't start with that again, Autumn." Dominic's voice carried that warning tone, the one that usually made me back down. "Mom's company has given us everything. The least we can do is help them expand sustainably." Vincent, my father's oldest friend and our foundation's legal counsel, approached slowly from the garden path. His presence was like a lifeline, and Dominic's grip finally fell away. Regina's eyes narrowed at the interruption. "Autumn dear," Vincent said, his weathered face creased with genuine concern, "your father would have wanted you to take some time to process things. The conservation area isn't going anywhere." "We're family," Regina cut in, gliding forward in her designer suit that seemed out of place among the wildflowers. "We'll help her process, won't we, Dominic?" I watched my husband nod the same way he always did when his mother spoke, the same automatic response I'd seen for 15 years of marriage. I felt the weight of my father's environmental impact studies in my bag, documents Dominic didn't know about yet, papers that would change everything. "I need to go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have things to arrange at the center." "Our center," Dominic corrected, "and it's too large for one person to manage. Mom's development plan makes more sense." "I need to go," I repeated, my fingers brushing against the rare orchid specimens my father had been documenting. Vincent touched my shoulder. "I'll drive you." "She's fine," Dominic snapped. "I'll take my wife home." "Actually," I said, catching the faint scent of the native flowers my father had spent his life protecting, "I'm not fine, and I'm not going anywhere with you right now." Regina gasped, perfectly timed for maximum dramatic effect. Her manicured hand clutched her designer blazer. "Dominic darling, you see how she's acting? This is exactly why she needs our guidance on the development project." I turned away, Vincent falling into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Regina's voice rising, could practically see Dominic's face reddening with that specific shade of embarrassment his mother always managed to produce. "You can't just walk away from progress," Regina called after me, her voice carrying across the memorial garden. "This conservation center needs our expertise." But I could walk away. The truth hit me halfway to Vincent's hybrid car. I'd been walking away from myself for 15 years, one small step at a time, letting Dominic's family reshape me into their idea of a proper corporate wife, watching my own environmental dreams fade like endangered species. Not anymore. Vincent opened the car door, and I slid inside, my hands shaking as I buckled the seatbelt. Through the windshield, I could see Dominic and his parents huddled together, three heads bent in conversation near my father's memorial plaque, planning their next move, no doubt. Let them plan. They didn't know about the recordings yet, or the falsified environmental impact reports, or the truth about what my father had discovered before he died. They had no idea what was coming. Vincent's car pulled up to the conservation center, my center now, just as the sun was setting. The old Victorian building's shadow stretched across the native plant garden like a warning. Dominic's Tesla already sat in the parking lot, a sleek reminder that I couldn't avoid what was coming. "You don't have to go in alone," Vincent said, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. "Actually, I do." I gathered my bag, feeling the weight of the environmental documents inside. "But thank you for everything." The front door opened before I reached it. Dominic stood there, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, like he was ready for another corporate takeover. Behind him, I could hear Regina's voice floating from our research library, probably already reorganizing my father's lifelong documentation of local ecosystems. "Nice of you to finally join us," Dominic said, stepping aside to let me pass. "Mom's reviewing the development proposals in my office, our office, Autumn, and she's trying to help." I moved past him. The familiar scent of Regina's expensive perfume overwhelmed the natural earthy smell of the center's indoor plants. She brought the same overwhelming presence to every major event in our married life. When Dominic made partner at the development firm, when they acquired their first wildlife reserve for sustainable development, and now here she was again, on the day we memorialized my father. "There you are." Regina's voice carried that artificial brightness she reserved for board meetings. She stood at my father's research desk, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than our annual conservation budget, spreading out glossy development plans. "Lawrence, look who finally made it back." My father-in-law barely glanced up from his phone, mumbling something that might have been a greeting. His government environmental advisor pin glinted dully on his lapel. "I'm not interested in your proposals," I said, heading for the stairs that led to the greenhouse observation deck. Dominic caught my arm. "Mom went to all this trouble to draft sustainable development plans." "Let her go, darling," Regina cut in, her gold bracelets clicking against the antique wood desk as she arranged her papers. "She's grieving, though I do wish she'd consider how her behavior affects the company's quarterly projections." I jerked away from Dominic's grip, taking the stairs two at a time. Behind me, I heard Regina's stage whisper, "You see what I mean? This is exactly why we need to take control of the conservation project." My father's research office door was ajar. I pushed it open, expecting the familiar comfort of his space, filled with specimens and careful documentation of local ecosystems. Instead, I froze. The room had been ransacked. Drawers hung open, environmental impact reports scattered across the desk, the framed endangered species map behind his chair hung crooked on the wall. My hands shook as I straightened it, revealing the wall safe behind, still locked, thank God. "Looking for something specific?" I spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway, his face unreadable in the soft glow of the energy-efficient lighting. "What did you do to my father's research?" He stepped inside, closing the door. The scent of his expensive cologne clashed with the natural bamboo air purifiers Dad had installed. "I was looking for the Conservation Trust documents, since you ran off with Vincent instead of discussing things like an adult. The trust documents are with the Environmental Law Office." "You know that." "Do I?" He moved closer, and I caught a whiff of scotch on his breath. You've been awfully secretive lately, just like your father was at the end. A chill ran through me, making the endangered species photographs on the wall seem to stare more intensely. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Dominic said, his voice dropping, that I know he changed the trust agreement. 3 weeks ago, right after our last board meeting. Right after Regina and I told him about our plans for developing this conservation land into an eco-friendly luxury community. The pieces clicked into place. The tension at that meeting, my father's sudden insistence on updating the Conservation Trust, the way Dominic and Regina had been hovering ever since, watching Dad like hawks. You were planning this before he even died. Planning what? To modernize this outdated facility? To make something of this oversized nature preserve that's blocking urban progress? Dominic ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Your father was sick, Autumn. He wasn't thinking clearly about sustainable development. Footsteps creaked on the stairs, followed by Regina's voice. Everything progressing up there? Fine, Mom, Dominic called back, his eyes never leaving mine. Autumn's just having a moment about the development plans. I moved toward the door, but he blocked my path. The rare plant specimens in their carefully labeled containers seemed to witness our confrontation. We're not done here. Actually, I said, I think we are, on several levels. I felt the weight of Dad's real environmental impact studies in my bag, the ones that proved this land was crucial for endangered species protection. His laugh was ugly. You really want to do this? Fight me over some plants and dirt? Because I promise you, Autumn, you won't win against Regina's legal team. I thought of the recordings in my purse, the falsified environmental reports, the truth about what Dominic and his family had been planning all along. We'll see about that. I pushed past him into the hallway. Regina stood at the top of the stairs, concern painted perfectly across her face like her expensive makeup. The development team is ready for our meeting, dears. Why don't we all sit down and talk about this like a proper corporate family? Family. The word had never sounded more like a threat to endangered species. The development plans spread across Vincent's conference table might as well have been a death sentence for my father's conservation area. Architectural renderings showed luxury condominiums sprawling across the protected land, cutting through habitats my father had spent 30 years preserving. The date in the corner, 3 months ago, burned into my vision. Dominic had commissioned these drawings before Dad even got sick. Look at this signature here, and Regina's company logo. Vincent placed a steaming cup of fair trade coffee beside me. There's more. He slid a folder across the recycled wood table. Inside, I found emails between Dominic and various developers, all dated weeks before my father's death. The language was careful, coded, but the intent was clear. They'd been planning to transform the conservation center into a sustainable luxury community, complete with private nature views for Regina's penthouse suite. They were just waiting for him to die. Not exactly, Vincent said, pulling out another document. They were waiting for him to sign this. The paper trembled in my hands as I read a transfer of conservation rights, drafted but never signed. My father's signature line sat empty at the bottom, a small victory for endangered species from beyond the grave. My phone buzzed. Another message from Dominic. I'd left the center last night after refusing to join their development planning meeting, and he'd been alternating between threats and pleading ever since. Something about thinking of our future and sustainable progress. You should read this one, Vincent said, holding up a final email. It's from Regina to the developers, dated 2 weeks before your father's death. The words blurred through tears of rage. Once we secure control of the Conservation Trust, we can proceed regardless of Autumn's objections. Dominic assures me she'll fall in line or face consequences. A key turned in Vincent's office door. I scrambled to gather the papers, but Vincent held up a hand. I invited someone. Lawrence stepped into the office, looking smaller somehow without Regina hovering nearby. His eyes fell on the development plans. "So, you found them," he said, his government environmental advisor pin conspicuously absent from his lapel. "Did you know?" I demanded. "The whole time? Did you know what they were planning to do to these protected species?" He sank into a chair, suddenly every bit his 62 years. "Regina said it was for the greater good, that we'd create a model of sustainable development, like a real eco-conscious family should. By destroying my father's life work? The habitats he protected?" My voice cracked with the same intensity I'd heard in Dad's voice whenever he spoke about endangered species. Lawrence's laugh was bitter. "Do you know what Regina called this place? The ecological obstacle." Every night, planning and plotting, while I sat there watching my wife and son turn into people who cared more about profit margins than preservation. My phone buzzed again. Dominic's message flashed across the screen. "The environmental lawyers are ready. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "They're meeting with contractors today," Lawrence said, pulling out his own phone. "Regina thinks she's won already. She's picking out sustainable materials for her executive suite that will overlook what used to be the butterfly sanctuary." I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. "They can't. The Conservation Trust isn't even." "They don't care," Lawrence cut in. "They never have. It's always been about control. Regina's control, and Dominic." He shook his head. "Dominic never learned to say no to her development plans." Vincent touched my arm. "Show him." I pulled out my father's last research log from my bag, the one I'd found in the safe after Dominic's failed search. Lawrence read it slowly, his face growing paler with each line documenting the systematic violation of environmental protection laws. "Your father knew," he whispered. "All this time, he knew what they were planning to do to this sanctuary. And he left me everything in an ironclad conservation trust. I need to stop them." I gathered the falsified environmental impact reports and development plans. "The question is, Lawrence, whose side are you really on? The preservationists or the developers?" He stared at his hands for a long moment. When he looked up, something had shifted in his eyes. "Regina's at the Conservation Center now," he said. "She's meeting the contractors at noon. She thinks." He swallowed hard. "She thinks she's finally winning the war against environmental protection." "She's not," I said, checking my watch. "Because in exactly 45 minutes, I'm going to show her what losing really looks like." Vincent picked up his car keys. "I'll drive. I've got all the legal injunctions ready." Lawrence stood, straightening his shoulders. "I'm coming too. It's time someone stood up to Regina's development plans, even if it has to be me." My phone buzzed one final time. Dominic's message was just one line: "Last chance, Autumn. Don't do anything you'll regret." But as we headed for Vincent's hybrid car, regret was the last thing on my mind. They wanted a war over my father's environmental legacy? Fine. I'd give them one they'd never forget. Regina's face turned ashen when we walked into the Conservation Center's butterfly sanctuary. She stood among a cluster of contractors, development plans spread across a portable table, her perfectly manicured finger frozen midpoint on a diagram that would turn endangered butterfly habitats into luxury penthouses. Dominic's expression shifted from confusion to rage as Lawrence stepped out from behind me. "What is he doing here?" Regina's voice could have frozen the spring buds off our rare maple trees. "Telling the truth," For once, Lawrence said. About what you're really planning to do to this protected land. The contractors shifted uncomfortably as I approached the table. One of them, older with kind eyes, glanced between the development plans and the fluttering endangered butterflies around us. Ms. Davidson, I wasn't aware this was a contested conservation area. It's not contested, Dominic cut in, moving to stand beside his mother. My wife is just emotional right now. Her father's passing. Her father's suspicious death, you mean? Vincent's quiet words dropped like stones in the butterfly sanctuary. Regina's tablet clattered to the ground. Dominic went still. What did you say? His voice was dangerous, low. I pulled out my father's last environmental report, along with the medical analyses we'd found hidden in his safe. Dad knew about the development plans. He also knew about the toxic sustainable building materials Regina had been planning to use, materials that would destroy these habitats. Convenient timing, wasn't it? His sudden decline, just when you needed him to sign over the conservation rights. That's ridiculous, Regina snapped, but her hands were shaking, crumpling the edge of her development plans. Lawrence, tell them how ridiculous this is. I found the environmental impact reports in your briefcase, Regina, 3 days before he died. I told myself I was imagining things, that you wouldn't destroy protected habitats, that our son wouldn't. The contractors were already packing up, murmuring apologies and quick exits. The older one paused beside me, pressing his card into my hand. Call us when this is sorted, Ms. Davidson. Legally sorted. We don't participate in projects that threaten endangered species. Dominic grabbed my arm as I tried to follow them. You're making a catastrophic mistake for everyone involved. The mistake was thinking you ever loved these endangered species more than your mother's profit margins. I jerked away from him, the nearby butterfly chrysalises bearing silent witness. The Environmental Protection Agency is already reviewing the evidence. They're very interested in Regina's falsified impact reports and the timing of your development plans. You wouldn't dare. Regina's perfect facade cracked like drought-parched earth. After everything we've done for conservation. Done for conservation? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my own. You mean like systematically undermining our protection efforts, criticizing every preservation decision we made, planning to destroy my father's life's work while he was still documenting new species? We were trying to help, Dominic insisted, but his eyes darted to the environmental reports in my hand. Mom just wanted what was best for sustainable development. Best for development? Lawrence's voice rose. Our son is facing possible environmental crime charges because you couldn't wait a few more months for legal permits? Because you had to control everything, every habitat, all the time? Regina turned on him, teeth bared. Don't you dare turn on me now. Everything I did for the future of this family's legacy. No, I held up my phone, recording app running. Everything you did for profit. And now everyone's going to know exactly what kind of conservationist you are. Dominic lunged for the phone, but Vincent stepped between us. In the distance, sirens wailed. That'll be the EPA investigators, Vincent said quietly. They're very interested in speaking with all of you about endangered species protection laws. Regina's composure shattered completely. Dominic, do something. But Dominic just stood there, looking lost, like a developer who'd finally realized the true cost of his projects. For the first time, I saw him clearly, not as my husband or Regina's son, but as a hollow man who'd never had the courage to stand up for real environmental protection. It's over, I said, watching EPA vehicles turn into the Conservation Center's driveway. The sanctuary stays as it is, and you all get to explain to the federal investigators exactly why my father died 3 days before your development plans were set to begin. You'll regret this, Regina hissed, but her eyes were wild with fear as they darted between the approaching officers and the protected butterfly habitats she'd planned to destroy. I thought of my father's last days, of the confusion in his eyes that we'd all dismissed as natural decline, of the development meetings Regina insisted on having with him alone, of Dominic's convenient business trips that kept him away from witnessing his mother's frequent visits. No, I said, watching the lead EPA investigator approach with her team. I don't think I will. The handcuffs clicked shut around Regina's wrists, and somewhere in the sanctuary, a rare blue butterfly emerged from its chrysalis, spreading its wings for the first time. Special Agent Morris's words echoed through the Conservation Center's empty research library. Regina made bail an hour ago. I gripped the edge of my father's research desk, knuckles white. Through the window, I could see Lawrence pacing the native plant garden, phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't spoken to Regina since her arrest 3 days ago. What about Dominic? My voice sounded distant, even among the familiar sounds of the sanctuary. Still in custody. Morris flipped through her notes. But his corporate lawyers are good, very good. They're already spinning a story about him being manipulated by his mother, claiming he had no knowledge of the falsified environmental reports. Vincent set a cup of herbal tea from our sustainable garden in front of me, but I couldn't bring myself to drink. He knew. He had to know about the habitat destruction plans. Proving it is another matter. Morris leaned forward across the reclaimed wood table. We need more than circumstantial evidence. Something concrete linking him directly to your father's death and the illegal development plans. My phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. I'd been getting them since Regina's arrest, each one more threatening than the last. This one made my blood freeze. Check the rare species greenhouse, autumn. Vincent touched my shoulder. What is it? I was already moving, Morris and Vincent following as I rushed across the sanctuary grounds. The greenhouse had been my father's pride, filled with endangered plant species he'd spent decades protecting and documenting. The door hung slightly ajar. Inside, devastation greeted us. Every endangered plant had been methodically destroyed. Rare orchid stems snapped, preservation containers shattered. On my father's research station lay a single environmental impact report, identical to the ones Regina had used to justify her development plans. Don't touch anything. Morris barked, pulling out her phone. But my eyes caught something else, a flash of white beneath the broken preservation equipment. I pointed, and Morris carefully extracted a stack of papers. Bank statements, emails, a second set of conservation documents dated before the ones we'd found in the safe. These are forged, Vincent said, examining them. They're trying to create a paper trail showing your father intended to release the land for development. Regina's signature style, I said, recognizing the falsified environmental permits. But the plan. This is all Dominic. This is how he operates in corporate takeovers. Lawrence appeared in the doorway, face ashen. Regina's gone. Her phone's disconnected, and she cleared out our joint accounts this morning. A crash from the main building made us all jump. We rushed back, Morris drawing her weapon. The front door stood wide open. Inside, Dominic stood in my father's research office, hands raised as 2 EPA officers trained their weapons on him. At his feet lay the open safe, empty except for scattered butterfly documentation photos. Looking for these? I held up the stack of evidence from the greenhouse, watching rare flower petals drift from between the pages. His eyes narrowed, focusing on the environmental permits in my hands. You don't understand what you're doing. This development could revolutionize sustainable urban planning. I understand perfectly. You and Regina thought you could forge documents showing Dad wanted to develop the sanctuary, plant them in the greenhouse, make it look like he'd hidden them, then destroy the real evidence of endangered species. She's lying, Dominic said to Morris. Everything in that safe proved Autumn's been obstructing progress. My mother was trying to protect our company's legitimate interests. By killing my father and destroying his life's work? By doing what needed to be done. Dominic's corporate mask cracked. You never appreciated what we were trying to build. A legacy. A real sustainable future. Not this outdated shrine to endangered species your father insisted on preserving. Lawrence stepped forward, his voice shaking. Where is she, Dominic? Where did your mother go? Why? So you can betray her again? Dominic's laugh was as hollow as the promises in his development plans. You're as weak as Autumn's father was. At least Mom had the courage to take decisive action. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number, but this time with an image. Regina sitting in what looked like a private airport lounge, holding today's newspaper. The text below, last chance. Sign over the conservation rights or the real evidence about your father's death goes public. She's bluffing, Vincent said, reading over my shoulder. But Dominic's smile told a different story. Are you sure about that? Mom kept very detailed records of her visits with your father. Every consultation about the development, every conversation about progress. Would you like the world to know how long he fought against your precious conservation efforts while you were too busy cataloging butterflies to notice? The research office spun around me. Morris was saying something about tracking Regina's phone signals. Lawrence was shouting at Dominic, but all I could hear was my father's voice from his last days. Something's wrong, Autumn. The development plans aren't right. I dismissed it as exhaustion from his endless species documentation. We all had. Dominic's smile widened as he watched me process this. Tick-tock, Autumn. How much of Dad's precious sanctuary are you willing to sacrifice to protect your own reputation? The most powerful legacy isn't in what we leave behind, but in what we help others become strong enough to protect for themselves. Regina's evidence arrived in a plain manila envelope delivered to the Conservation Center by courier. Inside, I found photos, handwritten notes, and a USB drive that documented every step of my father's decline. The final photo showed him in his research office, reviewing development permits, dated the day before he died. The look in his eyes, confusion, fear, betrayal, made my knees buckle. We can't trust these, Vincent said, but his voice lacked conviction as he studied the falsified permits. They could be manipulated. Special Agent Morris examined the USB drive. But the metadata is intact. These are original, unaltered files. Dominic sat across the room, still in handcuffs, but wearing that familiar corporate smirk. Mom always was thorough, especially when it came to protecting business interests. Protecting business interests? Lawrence's voice cracked. She killed a man, Jake. Your wife's father. She eliminated an environmental obstacle. Dominic leaned forward. Just like Autumn's become an obstacle. But there's still time to fix this. Sign over the conservation rights, and everything goes away. The evidence, the investigation, all of it. Morris's phone buzzed. She stepped away to take the call, then returned looking grim. Regina's been spotted boarding a private jet to a non-extradition country. We're trying to ground it, but... Too late, Dominic said. She's probably already in international airspace. Tick-tock, Autumn. Once she releases those files to the media, your father's legacy becomes an environmental scandal. Every newspaper, every environmental journal will run stories about the confused conservationist who died under suspicious circumstances while his daughter was too busy with her preservation projects to notice. My hands shook as I lifted another photo from the envelope, Dad in his butterfly sanctuary, looking lost among his beloved species. Regina's handwriting on the back, day 47. Increased pressure about development. Subject showing signs of severe resistance. Subject, I whispered. She documented his opposition to the development like a corporate takeover. She documented your negligence, Dominic corrected. The devoted mother-in-law who tried to warn you something was wrong, who stepped in to help modernize the sanctuary while you focused on your outdated conservation methods. The concerned businesswoman who noticed his decline but couldn't convince his stubborn daughter to consider progress. Vincent grabbed my arm as I lurched toward Dominic. He's baiting you. The development contracts are ready, Dominic continued. One signature, and this all disappears. Mom releases a statement about a misunderstanding, returns to help manage a sustainable development project. Your father's reputation stays intact. Everyone wins. Everyone except Dad, I said. And the countless species he protected. He's gone, Autumn, but you're not. Think about your future, about the scandal this will cause, about how the environmental community will look at you, wondering if you knew all along what was happening to him and his outdated preservation methods. Morris cleared her throat. The planes cleared U.S. airspace. We've notified Interpol, but nothing will stick, Dominic finished. Not without creating a media circus that destroys everything your father built. Is that what you want? To turn his conservation legacy into a true crime environmental scandal? I looked around the research office, at the carefully preserved specimens Dad loved, the detailed documentation of endangered species, the butterfly sanctuary visible through the window, everything he'd built, everything he'd protected, tainted by Regina's methodical documentation of her corporate takeover. Time's running out, Dominic said softly. Mom's given you 1 hour to decide. After that, the files go public. Every detail, every photo, every moment of his resistance to progress. Is your revenge worth destroying his memory? Lawrence stepped forward. There has to be another way to protect the sanctuary. There isn't. Dominic's smile was triumphant. Mom made sure of that. She always does. My phone buzzed. Another message from Regina, a video this time, showing Dad in his final days, confused and afraid, arguing against development plans while Regina's voice soothed him with promises of sustainable progress. I'll need to see the development contracts, I said quietly. Autumn, no. Vincent protested, but I was already reaching for the document Dominic's corporate lawyer had delivered, the conservation rights transfer agreement that would give them everything they wanted, everything they'd killed for. Smart girl, Dominic said. I knew you'd make the rational choice. I lifted the pen, feeling its weight like a nail in the coffin of endangered species. In the sanctuary, the last of Dad's protected butterflies danced in the sunlight, soon to be displaced by whatever luxury development Regina and Dominic planned to build. Just sign, Dominic urged. End this environmental nightmare. The pen hovered over the signature line as Regina's final text arrived, time's up. Choose wisely. The pen never touched the paper. Instead, I reached for my father's favorite research equipment, the high-resolution camera still sitting on his desk, the one Regina had handled during her final consultation. What are you doing? Dominic's smirk faltered. Something Dad taught me. I lifted the camera, examining its sophisticated lens. About butterfly migration patterns, about patience, about hidden surveillance of endangered species. Vincent stepped closer, realization dawning on his face. I caught his eye, saw him reach slowly for his phone. Enough games. Dominic snapped. Sign the development rights, or Mom releases everything. You mean like this? I turned the camera over, revealing the tiny backup drive embedded in its base. Dad wasn't as confused as you thought. He knew something was threatening his sanctuary, so he started documenting everything, recording everything. The color drained from Dominic's face. You're lying. The cameras were everywhere, in his research equipment, his field journals, even the endangered plant specimens Regina destroyed yesterday. I nodded to Morris, who was already typing on her phone. Every conversation, every meeting about development plans, every discussion about removing obstacles, all streaming to a secure environmental protection server. Impossible, Dominic whispered, but his eyes darted to the camera, then to his handcuffs. Your mother was thorough, Dominic, but Dad was more thorough. He knew you were planning something. He just didn't expect his own family to kill him for a luxury development project. Regina's voice suddenly filled the room from Morris's phone, streaming the server's contents. Just sign the development rights, Richard. Dominic and I have everything under control. The sanctuary is outdated anyway. Dominic lunged forward despite his restraints. Turn it off. Can't do that, Morris said, nodding to her officers. This is evidence now. All of it. You don't understand, Dominic's voice cracked. Mom will release everything, the photos, the videos. Let her. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear replacing his corporate arrogance. Let the world see what she documented, what you helped cover up. Every file she releases will match perfectly with Dad's recordings, except Dad's will show the whole truth about your planned destruction of protected habitats. Vincent's phone buzzed. Regina's plane just turned around. Interpol's orders. That's impossible, Dominic said. She has diplomatic immunity through Dad's Environmental Council position. Had, Lawrence cut in, holding up his own phone. I just spoke with the council board. Seems Regina's immunity was tied to my advisory position, the position I resigned from 10 minutes ago. Dominic slumped in his chair. Dad, you can't. Can't what? Stand by while your mother faces justice for environmental crimes, like I did when she orchestrated Richard's death? Lawrence's voice shook. I've done enough standing by. My phone lit up with a message from Regina, the last one she'd ever send me. You'll regret destroying our family's future. I typed back 3 words, watch the recordings. The officers led Dominic away as Morris played more of Dad's documentation. Regina's voice filled the room again, meticulously detailing her plans, while Dad's hidden cameras captured every moment, every confession, every calculated move toward destroying the sanctuary. The research equipment, Vincent said softly. He had cameras in the specimens she destroyed yesterday. She thought she was destroying evidence, I replied. She was actually preserving it. Every broken container released another memory card. Your father, Lawrence's voice cracked. He knew. He suspected. That's why he updated the Conservation Trust, why he left everything in an ironclad preservation agreement. I picked up the development contracts, tearing them slowly in half. He made sure Regina and Dominic could never touch the sanctuary, no matter what happened to him. Morris ended the playback. We'll need your testimony about the environmental crimes. You'll have it. Every detail. I looked around the research office, at the conservation center Regina had tried to destroy, at the environmental legacy she'd tried to bulldoze. Let her release her evidence. Let everyone see exactly what kind of developer she is. Vincent touched my shoulder. Richard would be proud. No, I said, watching Dominic's police escort disappear down the driveway. He'd be heartbroken. But he'd understand. In the sanctuary, through the research office window, I could see the surviving butterflies dancing in the afternoon light, Dad's final witnesses, keeping their secrets safe until the moment of truth, just like he taught me. The verdict came down like thunder in the quiet courtroom. Regina's face remained stone still as the judge read her sentence for environmental crimes, but her hands trembled, rattling her handcuffs. Dominic wouldn't look at me, wouldn't look at anyone. His earlier corporate confidence dissolved into something smaller, more fragile. Lawrence sat beside me, shoulders bowed but steady. He testified against them both, his quiet voice carrying more weight than Regina's practiced protestations or Dominic's rehearsed excuses. Outside, reporters waited with their questions about justice and conservation, about healing and moving forward. They didn't understand. Some sanctuaries don't need to heal. They just need to be protected. Back at the conservation center, I found Vincent in the butterfly sanctuary, carefully documenting new chrysalises. New life had emerged from the destruction, tiny wings preparing to spread for the first time. "Your father's last research notes," Vincent said, holding out a weathered envelope. "He asked me to wait until after the trial." The paper felt warm, alive somehow. Inside, I found a single page covered in Dad's familiar scientific handwriting. "My dearest Autumn, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and you've discovered the truth about Regina and Dominic. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you, for the choice I made in documenting everything instead of confronting them directly. But I knew they'd never stop, never be satisfied until they'd destroyed every last protected acre. The surveillance wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about teaching you one last lesson, that conservation, like the butterflies we loved, requires patience, careful observation, and the courage to wait for the right moment to act. I've left you more than just the sanctuary. I've left you the strength I always saw in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. The strength to stand alone, to face hard truths, to protect what matters most." In the butterfly sanctuary, behind the broken equipment and Regina's destruction, you'll find something I've been working on, a new species I discovered just months ago. I've named it Papilio autumnalis because, like you, it thrives not in spite of adversity but because of it. Study it, protect it, let it remind you that even in our darkest moments, nature finds a way. All my love, Dad. Vincent touched my shoulder. "There's something else you should see." He led me to the back of the sanctuary, where a single chrysalis hung hidden behind the recovering plants. Inside, a stunning blue and gold butterfly emerged, its wings as pure as truth, streaked with patterns of deep emerald like justice finally served. He documented it just before Vincent's voice trailed off. "The genetics are completely unique. It's officially registered with the International Commission on Conservation. Your father's final discovery, and yours." My phone buzzed, a message from Special Agent Morris. Regina's offshore accounts had been frozen, the funds redirected to environmental restoration. Dominic's development firm had stripped his name from their partnership. Their carefully constructed empire was crumbling, one piece at a time. I switched off the phone. "Help me restore this sanctuary," I asked Vincent, gesturing to the recovering habitats around us. He smiled, understanding what I wasn't saying. Sometimes conservation starts with simple things: protecting what remains, healing what was damaged, new life emerging from destruction. We worked in comfortable silence, documenting recovering species and restoring habitats. Lawrence joined us later, his corporate polish replaced by field research gear and determination. Together, we rebuilt what Regina had tried to destroy, making space for something new to thrive. As the sun set, I watched a newly emerged Papilio autumnalis spread its wings in the center of the sanctuary. Its delicate patterns caught the fading light, transforming it into something almost otherworldly, beautiful, and resilient, like truth finally set free. Dad was right. Some things require patience, careful observation, the courage to wait. And some things, like justice and butterflies in conservation, emerge in their own time, in their own way. I touched a perfect wing pattern, feeling its strength beneath the delicate surface. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more reporters, more habitats to protect. But tonight, in this sanctuary my father loved, surrounded by recovering species growing strong again, I finally understood what he'd known all along. The most powerful legacy isn't in what we leave behind, but in what we help others become strong enough to protect for themselves.